Now it is time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Karl.
Good evening, my name's Karl, I'm an alcoholic. I would like to thank Laura for asking me to come out here. If you're like really new and just coming down, I just want to say something to maybe, in case your mind is wandering and you are wondering if you're really seeing Satan guarding the door, I just want to let you know, yes, that is actually happening. Those must be the gates. Those must be the gates of insanity or death, right there, I guess. But it's a pleasure to be at Rodeo. God, I used to have a commitment here from '89 to '94. It's run exactly the same, except I think the only difference between back then and now is back then the speakers all used to share what it was like, what happened, and what they were wearing. It really was a dog and pony show. But anyway, I'm grateful to be here. Good to see a lot of old friends. And the most important thing I can tell you about myself is that I'm an alcoholic. And the reason I believe I'm an alcoholic is really very simple. I have a really bizarre relationship with alcohol. And this strange relationship that I have with alcohol takes on a couple of forms. The first part of this bizarre relationship that I have with alcohol happens when I drink it. A really strange thing happens when I drink booze. The book calls it an allergic reaction. They say the symptom of this allergic reaction is what they call the phenomenon of craving. And the best way that I can describe this thing the book calls the phenomenon of craving in my life is that it seems like whenever I drink booze, the more booze I drink, the thirstier I get. It happened with nothing else. An example of that is they were kind enough to give me this bottle of water, and over the next half hour that I'm talking with you, I'll probably drink half of it. I don't know. If my mouth gets really dry, I might finish this bottle of water. But I can absolutely guarantee you that when I finish this bottle of water, I'm not going to go get a case of water and lock myself in a hotel room. I'm not. I absolutely promise. But if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, is this bizarre physical reaction that I get to it, if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, well then Just Say No would have wiped out alcoholism. Right? In the early 80s, Nancy Reagan came out and said, just say no. I would have, and I imagine you would have gone, oh, no, and just gone on and lived a happy, successful life. But I have this other bizarre relationship with alcohol, and that's when I'm not drinking. I seem to have this mind that'll rationalize and justify my walk back to the next drink at all costs. And it does not matter about the pain, humiliation, and suffering of a day, a week, a month ago. And it doesn't matter whether it was my pain and humiliation or your pain and humiliation. I am going to drink again. What happens to me is that when the drinking gets too unbearable, I stop. But then not drinking becomes more unbearable than the memory of my last drunk, and I drink again. And I cannot drink successfully, but I cannot not drink successfully. It's the ultimate catch-22 called alcoholism. And that's it in a nutshell. And I set this relationship up with alcohol right from the get-go when I first started drinking. I started drinking a lot later than a lot of people in AA. I was 11. And it's late these days. And we lived in Seattle, and a typical morning in 7th grade for me would be I'd show up early for school, not for a study hall or anything, but to meet my new friends at the very edge of the school property, Loser's Corner. Every school's got a Loser's Corner about 5 feet off the school property. And we'd be out there smoking, and we'd also have what I like to call the playground cocktail. That's a jar full of whatever you could rip off out of the parents' liquor cabinet the night before. Now that jar is really scary because nobody's been to bartending school yet. So there's equal amounts of whiskey, vodka, cream de menthe, vermouth, all in that same jar. There's green shit floating around in there. And you can imagine 5 or 6 of us 11, 12-year-olds choking that down, and it was the early 70s, so we're smoking that commercial pot. Anybody remember that stuff? 4-finger lids, $10 a bag, seeds and stems and the whole bit. And it was even before Ziploc bags came out, when it would just be a regular Glad bag. And as you'd roll it up, there'd be about 9 people spit on it. You're like, oh man. And we'd pack all those seeds and stems and leaves into a homemade pipe, maybe made out of plumbing fittings and a screen. Or if we were really desperate that morning, it would be a toilet paper roll with aluminum foil and pinholes in it. Now, it's at this point that many people that speak at meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's at this point that they often interrupt themselves, and they say something like this. I don't mean to offend anybody, but drugs are a part of my story. I have great respect. I understand what they're trying to do, and I have great respect for what they're attempting to do. They are attempting to protect singleness of purpose. Vitally important aspect of Alcoholics Anonymous should never be forgotten. But that idea aside, I still think it's a really bizarre practice for alcoholics to apologize to other alcoholics for doing drugs while drinking or in between drunks. See, I understand apologizing to police officers and judges and people that may still love us, but I don't know why we apologize to each other. In fact, the most bizarre example I've ever seen of that, it was a number of years ago. I was in a speaker meeting somewhere in LA, and that night the speaker was up there just giving one of the most ugly, heinous, blow-by-blow drunkalogs I've ever heard. And I got to tell you, when I'm in a speaker meeting out there listening and the speaker's story gets really ugly, the uglier it gets, the more excited I get. I think that night I was on the edge of my chair drooling, looking up at this guy going, yeah, buddy, go, 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 go. And at one point in this really ugly story, the speaker went on to say, hey, I had 4 DUIs, and the judge said if I get one more DUI, I'm going to prison for sure. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I'm on the freeway, he says. I'm on the freeway in a blackout, and I hit a family of 4, and they wound up in the hospital, and I wound up in prison. In prison, I sodomized men. I was sodomized, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I did some drugs too. So anyway, by the time I'm 14, I'm the neighborhood drunk, I'm the neighborhood drug dealer. I forgot to mention, but my father was a neighborhood Lutheran minister. Yeah, he was not laughing. My parents, really good, solid people, really good, solid people. I had every advantage that any adolescent could have for a good life, and it was no secret to my parents that I'm withering away right in front of their eyes. I mean, by the time I'm 14, my typical afternoon is I'm locked in my bedroom, my hair is down in front of my bloodshot eyes, I'm listening to Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, getting all the necessary tools for living, you know. And my vocabulary at this point is, whoa, wow, right? That's my vocabulary. And my parents tried to help. They tried to help, but you see, they didn't understand that I'm alcoholic. They blamed my problems on people, places, and things. They thought if we can get him away from that damn group of kids he's hanging out with, things will get better. If we can get him out of that damn public school system, things will get better. They tried all of the above. But you see, I'm alcoholic. My problems are not based upon people, place, and things. My problems are based upon my physical and mental relationship to alcohol. See, if you change the people, place, and things in somebody's life like mine, all that happens is that I'm loaded with different people in different places, ruining different things. That's all that happens. By the time I was 18, I barely scraped out of the public school system there in Seattle. My parents decided that Seattle was the problem, so they sent me 300 miles away to Washington State University. I spent 3 years at that university on my parents' money, and I got about almost 10 credits. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content is what was going on. By the time I was 22, this little story I'm about to tell you will let you know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, my father was Swedish, my mother is Icelandic, therefore I look like a polar bear. And I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you about is Scandinavian or whether it's Lutheran. I don't know. But at Christmas time, my parents wouldn't just send out Christmas cards to their friends and relatives. They would send out this big, long Christmas letter that said everything the family had been doing that year. And when I was about 22, I got a hold of one of these letters that had been sent out the previous Christmas, and as I read it, it let me know exactly where I stood with my family. The first paragraph talked about what my parents had been doing that year, another impressive year, I'm sure. The next paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year, and that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, with a master's degree in human resources. She's now working for a large pharmaceutical company in the Midwest. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. Her hobbies are this, this, and this. She's a very happy young woman. We're very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Western Washington State University with a degree in marketing. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in downtown Seattle. He loves to golf, he loves to travel. He's engaged to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou, who works for a very small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. It was small at one time. And they love to golf together, they love to travel together. He's a very happy young man. We're very proud of him. Our youngest son, Karl, just turned 22. It's about this same time that It's about this same time a drug deal went really, really bad. It was just a really bad night, just a bad night. And I joined the Navy. Seemed like a good idea at the moment. And what I'm about to tell you should scare the living daylights out of you, but on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test. It's called the ASVAB test. And this test qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should scare the daylights out of you if you care anything about the security of the United States, that the United States Navy would even think maybe, possibly, or even remotely about putting somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base for boot camp, and I could not pass that test. It's called a urinalysis test is what it's called. They kept me in anyway, and a year and a half later, I'm a lower rank than when I first came in. And this one morning, I was already in a lot of trouble because of my drinking and using, and I'd been drinking all weekend, and it was just a typical Monday morning where I'm just I got this pint, and I'm driving my car into the base and just trying to get enough in me to last half the day so I could sneak back out to the car to get another few pulls on the bottle. And there's a guard check at the front of every Navy base where a Marine stands duty. If you're going to bring your car into the base, you have to pull up. He'll check the sticker on your car. He'll check your military ID. If everything's okay, you can come on the base. This particular morning, I guess there was a depth perception problem going on. I remember looking up, and the Marine had his head out of the guard check. He had this look like this on him. And I was wondering what he was so excited about, and then I realized I'm going 40 miles an hour. I tried to swerve, I promise, and car hit this median on the right-hand side and flipped over, and bam, right through the guard check. I can still see this Marine doing this big dive out of there. He was all right. They were patching me up to the hospital and reading new charges on me, and new charges is nothing new. That's just what happens in a guy's life like mine about every 90 days if you're living the way I'm living. But the most significant thing that the Navy did that morning is they prescribed this stuff called ANTABUSE for me. And every morning before quarters, I have to show up at sick bay, and the corpsman would put this little white pill on my tongue and make me sit there for a half an hour to make sure it actually ingested in my system. Over the next 7 to 10 days, I started to experience the most cunning, baffling, and powerful side of this disease we call alcoholism, and that is I had no alcohol or drugs in my system at all, and I was literally going insane. I had developed a mental obsession and a spiritual malady so severe that no amount of discipline from the military, no amount of information I was getting from the Navy psychologists they were sending me to, no amount of love from anybody that may have still cared, and that was real thin at this point. None of it was going to overcome what I was facing, and I was facing untreated alcoholism, and I didn't even know what I was facing. All I knew is as the days went by on that ANTABUSE, I was literally going insane. I remember counting those days just. It's been 4 days, and I'm on ANTABUSE. Now it's been 6 days, and I'm on ANTABUSE. Now it's been 8 days, 6 hours, and 15 minutes, and I'm on ANTABUSE. And I started to look around that ship. The other men, they're talking behind my back. All 300 of them. Have you ever felt that way in AA? The only difference is that in AA, we are talking behind your back. Only with love and tolerance at Rodeo, I'm sure. On the 10th day, I just snapped. I went AWOL from my ship, locked myself in a little hotel room in downtown San Diego, Plaza Hotel. It's still there, 4th and Broadway. This was 1986. It was $13 a night then. I checked a few months ago. They've upgraded it. It's now $13.95 a night. And I locked myself in a little hotel room and got a bottle of vodka and a shot glass. And I remember that the Navy doctors, as I sat there staring at the bottle of vodka and the shot glass, I remembered that the Navy doctors had given me a very stern warning about drinking on top of ANTABUSE when they had prescribed it for me. They had told me, son, you need to understand that if you drink on top of this ANTABUSE, you're going to get one of two reactions. One reaction is you're going to get violently ill. The other reaction is you might die. I remember looking at the bottle of vodka and I thought, well, I wonder which reaction I'm going to get. I took one shot and nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure. And I took another shot. all of a sudden I felt tingly in the face, so I looked in this cracked little mirror that was in this hotel room, and I was bright red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden I could feel my heart going boom, boom, boom. Looked at my shirt, I was drenched in sweat, and then all of a sudden I was like hyperventilating. We're doing all right so far. You guys are really sick if you think that's funny. I took another shot, and up it came, my late sponsor, Eddie Cochran, God rest his soul. Eddie Cochran used to call this next thing that happened to me projectile regurgitation. Just straight up and out, no warning. Thank God the Plaza Hotel is the type of hotel room where the toilet's in the same room as the bed. It's just a design feature, I think, just to maybe to make ex-convicts feel more at home or something. I don't know. I don't know. But I found the magic of drinking on top of ANTABUSE, that if I would keep drinking and keep puking and keep drinking and keep puking for about an hour to an hour and a half, enough of the ANTABUSE would kick out of my system and I would quit throwing up, and I would just be left with red face, hyperventilating, and sweating, and I'm all right with that. Right. So if there is anybody, they don't use it very much anymore, but if there is anybody that is new, I do want you to know that you can drink on top of ANTABUSE, but you got to get two things going on at the very same time if you're going to accomplish this. First thing you got to do is you got to hang in there. You really got to hang in there. And at the very same time, don't die. If you can get those two things going on at the very same time, I invite you, have at it. I drank on top of ANTABUSE for the last 7 months of my drinking. The only words to describe this are desperation drinking. My second to my last drunk, I was left for dead in a motel parking lot, 3 a.m. in the morning. It was just one of those nights where fists are flying and mine aren't. You know, you just can't get it going. And this blood was everywhere. And, you know, and I came to, the next thing I remember is I come to, and you know how when you come to and you look for evidence as to, am I all right? Am I at home? Am I in jail? Where am I? This particular morning when I came to, the first thing I saw were men and women with surgical masks on and bright lights behind them and tools in their hands. This is evidence of a very bad night. And my last night of drinking, I'm being let out of San Diego jail, being transferred from civilian authorities to military authorities. I'm in handcuffs, being brought back up to the quarterdeck of my ship. That morning, the officer deck put his arm up and said, wrong answer. Orders have already been processed on this loser. We're not to accept him on board. The orders are 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, or treatment. Now, as I stood there in handcuffs and lots of official type people standing around me, I do not remember thinking, oh, thank God they're offering this treatment thing. Oh, you are so good. I don't remember thinking or feeling that, nor do I remember thinking or feeling, and this would have been more likely, but I don't remember thinking or feeling this either. It would have been more likely for, as I stood there in handcuffs, to be thinking, hey, if I just act like I want this treatment thing, maybe I can beat this rap too. That would have been more likely, but I don't remember thinking or feeling that. I now know that it would not have mattered what I was thinking or feeling at that particular moment because I was in handcuffs. And I don't know about your experience in handcuffs, but my experience in handcuffs throughout my life was always the same. Whoever had me in handcuffs, never did they ever turn to me and say, so what's your opinion on this matter? It just never goes that way in handcuffs, does it? I was taken up to this treatment center up in the north end of San Diego at Miramar, and when the doors were locked behind me, that's when they took the handcuffs off me. That is who Karl Morris is without Alcoholics Anonymous. That is what society feels about how I act out there in the world without Alcoholics Anonymous, and rightfully so. They're willing to take the handcuffs off me when the doors are locked behind me. So I'm in this treatment center, and we're going to do 45 days, and I'm going to skip through the treatment center thing. Basically, it was an excellent, as far as treatment centers go, excellent treatment center because they took us to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous from day 7 till we got out. Every single night, we're at another meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And all I can tell you is during the day when they were doing the group therapy stuff, some of it I identified with, I guess, but I guess I was learning up here, right? It wasn't bad information, it just didn't hit me. But when they took us to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, that's when it just hit me right here. And I knew what it was is as I sat in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was real new, I remember thinking, I know that you know. Now, if you would have asked me at any point, so what is it that they know that you think you know? I would have said, well, I don't know. But I know that they know. And what it was is that the meetings they were taking to, I guess you guys were sharing responsibly, because I was hearing what Alcoholics Anonymous wants any new person to hear. I was identifying with the way you described your drinking, and even more importantly, I was identifying with the way you described the way you felt when you were not drinking. Because that's the thing that had been killing me my whole life, the way I felt when I was not drinking, and that just absolutely, I would just close in. It would, literally what would happen to me is when I would not drink for too long, it would feel like somebody had slipped a life-size body condom on me, just bam. And I'd be looking at the world through this thin film, and I could not connect with anybody or anything. I could not connect with life unless I took a drink, right? And yet you're screaming at me not to drink, but it's the only thing I got. It's the only thing that makes any sense anymore in my life is somewhere between the 7th and 8th drink. It's all I got. But that's getting unbearable. But you know what? Not as unbearable as the way I feel when I'm not drinking. And you guys were talking about that. I remember I think it was like the second meeting I was at. I got really confused. Most of the time I'm really identifying, but the second meeting I was at, I think it was the second, everybody at the meeting was talking about something called a drug of choice, and the more they said, people were up there saying, well, my drug of choice is, and somebody else would say, well, my drug of choice is. And the more they said that, the more confused I got. I was sitting in the back going, oh, for God's sake, was I supposed to be choosing out there or what? Do they want me to choose now? What are they talking about? So I'm back at the treatment center the next morning. I asked the counselor who had been assigned to us, I go, Mary, last night in the meeting they were talking about something called a drug of choice. What in the hell do they mean by that? And she said, Karl, let's play a game. Now that worried me because she was going to want me to focus for a few minutes. And they still had me on these anticonvulsant medications, and I don't know if you've ever been on those, but your field of vision is just fine about like this, but there's dancing squiggly things over here, and when you turn to look at them, now they're over here. And it's kind of hard to focus. And I tried, and she said, okay, we'll figure out what your drug of choice is, Karl. Imagine this. Imagine I walked into this room and I had a tray, and on that tray I had a bottle of Jack Daniels, an ounce of cocaine, and an ounce of Thai stick. Which one would you take? I started to drool immediately. Just, oh, God, I take them all. She started to snap her fingers. Settle down, Karl, she said. Focus, focus. And I'm like, whoa, whoa. She said, you can't have them all. You can only have one. I said, well, okay, if I can only have one, I guess I'd take the ounce of cocaine. She said, well, then maybe cocaine is your drug of choice. Do you understand now? And I said, no. No. And she said, what's the problem? I said, well, Mary, the only reason I take the ounce of cocaine over the other two is, well, I take that ounce of cocaine, I get the hell out of this place, and I'd sell 2 8-balls. Now I'd have enough money for a quarter pound of Thai sticks and a case of Jack Daniels. That's what I would do. Now, the only reason I bring that up is to bring up a very important aspect of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's sobriety dates. First thing, if you're new, it's really important to get one. Alcoholics Anonymous makes a lot more sense when you have a sobriety date. The second thing I want to talk about is there's only one sobriety date, no matter what you think your drug of choice is. I know there's a lot of people that work with a lot of new people. I saw sponsors giving cakes. I know there's a lot of people up here that work with lots of new people. And I imagine you run across this like I do in my home group out in Covina. See some new guy around my home group for a while, go up to him and say, hey, good to see you. How long do you got? And every once in a while I get this. Well, my drinking sobriety date is January 4th. My pot clean date is May 25th. Oh, I blew my meth date last night. I was in Walmart all night. No, one sobriety date. Funniest thing I ever heard in regards to sobriety date, same scenario. I saw this guy around my home group for a while, went up to him and said, hey, good to see you. How long do you got? And he said, well, I had 90 days, but I drank last night, so now I have 89 days. I had to think about that one myself. I think that kind of falls in the same category as being down in Mexico looking at the tequila going, would that affect my U.S. sobriety date? Yes. If you're new, sobriety dates are international. It's just a little piece of information, that's all. So anyway, I get out of this treatment center after 45 days, and I'm as crazy as can be. The only thing I know is that the only place I felt comfortable was while I was physically sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You put me outside a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't know which way to turn, left or right, go forward, back, I don't know. But in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, they were speaking this language that seemed to give me this feeling that I could breathe, and I didn't even know I was short of breath. So that's where I went, right out of the treatment center, went to the 6 o'clock gong show meeting in Pacific Beach, and I'm sitting in the back. The truth about my life is I'm 45 days without a drink or a drug. I've got a lot of information, and I'm physically feeling better than I've felt since I've been a young teenager. But there had been no spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, or even a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. I had 45 days information and feeling better. Dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. If there was ever a turning point in my life, it was sitting right in the back of that meeting on Friday night at 6 o'clock. Which way is my life going to go? And one guy, I'm sure there were a lot of other guys, but this is the guy that happened to be lurking around the back of that meeting, and he was operating on his primary purpose. He saw me, he went over and said, "Hey, never seen you here before. What are you doing?" And I did not think quick enough to lie to him, because I promise you I would have lied to him if I would have thought for one more second. And I said, "I don't know, buddy. I just got out of a Navy treatment center 2 hours ago. You got me. I don't know what I'm doing." This guy's eyes went bing, big smile went across his face. At the break, he's fighting his friends. He's mine, I got him, I got him, I got him. I didn't know there's guys in AA that like pounce on new guys, right? There was something else going on in this guy's life that particular night that made him especially glad to meet me. This guy's girlfriend had left him the night before for one of his friends in his home group. So he was wondering what to do with his weekend: homicide, suicide, get loaded, or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this guy was insane over this woman, just literally insane. In between the meetings, he'd throw me in the passenger side of his car and he'd start driving and he'd start yelling. He wouldn't even look at the road. He had like one of those AA radar cars that just made it to the next meeting, I guess. And he'd be yelling at me. He'd go, "You gotta go to meetings, you gotta read the book, you gotta get it sponsored. God damn her! Gotta go to meetings, gotta read the book, damn it!" And I'm like, now I didn't know it, but I was getting a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I'm so very glad that that guy that night was a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who had done the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, had taken the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and understood that the solution to his pain was out of self, out of self, out of self. I am so glad that that guy that night, in his pain, was not at home underneath his covers, whining into his sponsor's answering machine, "Where are you? Call me!" Right? I'm so glad that he understood that there's no magical answer. There's only magical actions to take, right? And by going to so many meetings in the same area of town that weekend, I learned something really valuable about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, especially when we're new. See, I saw other people that were going to multiple meetings over that weekend. Now, I didn't see anybody else doing 18 meetings, just me and that guy. But I saw other people that were at 2 or 3 meetings over the weekend. And what I learned about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to correlate it to a football game. Now, a football team is out there on the field for one reason and one reason only: to win the game. And how do they win that game? They huddle up, they make a plan, and they do one play. Then they huddle up again, make another plan, and they do one play. Well, that's exactly what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the game around here is one day without a drink or a drug, you are a big winner. And how do we do that one day? We run in here and we huddle up. And we go, remember, we're bodily and mentally different from our fellows. Break! And we go out there and we try a little of this, and we try a little of that. After that weekend, I got back to my ship, and there was one sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous on that ship. His name was Bob W. He had 14 months, and I was going to be the first one he ever worked with. And God, he was going to do it right. He was so, I swear, I am so grateful that this guy was a real active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am so glad that the one guy, one sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous on that ship wasn't somebody who hadn't been to a meeting in a year. Right? This guy was really active. I'm so great. He was living a really valuable way of life. A really valuable way of life. The way he was living his life was so valuable that all he had to do to effectively help save my life was stick his hand out and say, "Come do what I'm doing." That's a really valuable way to live your life. If you can just stick your hand out to somebody else and say, "Do what I'm doing." Jesus. I mean, it was just amazing. He became my first sponsor before I ever asked him. I just was doing the stuff that a guy would do, just all over me, hounding me, following me, you know. And he was doing it not because I was alcoholic. He was doing it because he was alcoholic, right? Big concept that I didn't understand, and I don't know whether he understood it at the time, but he literally was just, he looked at me like I was like gold being delivered to him on a silver platter, right? And he had no idea whether I would stay, but he was all over me. And For the next 6, 7 months, we went to meetings, coffee, meetings, coffee. And I'm running around meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous in San Diego and wherever we would pull into port, just as many meetings as I could. And I didn't understand that for the first 6 or 7 months of my sobriety, I was dying of untreated alcoholism in the middle of the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was running to meetings still with that desperate feeling for, please say something funny, please say something that makes sense, please say something, goddammit, so that I could get that feeling like I could breathe again. And thank God there's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous that show up no matter what's going on in their life to carry the message so that guys like me can have Band-Aids put on their untreated alcoholism temporarily till hopefully I can take an action that's going to save my life. And at 7 months sober, I was having nights where I'd be holding my gut going, God damn it, what's wrong with me? If this is what sobriety is, I can't hang very long, because that sick, dark, ugly feeling would creep back in. And our ship had to go out to sea for 21 days straight. That was abnormal for our particular mission on our ship. And my first sponsor, Bob, made me meet him in the aft end of the ship, way down in this battery shop, and he brought that book and he threw the big book down on the counter and said, come on, I've been hounding you forever. Have you read it? I said something stupid like, yeah, sure. There's like how it works. We antagonists, some doctor with some opinion about something. Basically out of ignorance and inexperience with working with others, but his sincere desire to help, Bob gave me Alcoholics Anonymous in its purest form. He and I sat in the bottom of that ship every night from 6:30 to 9. He would read, I would read. He would read, I would read, and when the book asked us to do something, we did it. And what happened at the end of that 21 days, I got what is described in the back of the book as a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. But I did not get the spiritual awakening or the spiritual experience that's promised in Alcoholics Anonymous until I did something else. Until I ever so feebly tried to do what had been done with me with somebody else. That's when the healing at the level of my soul started to take place. That's when I got to sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and not desperately wait for somebody to say something to fix me. That's when, in the middle of the night, when that feeling would creep in, I would quit saying, and this was one of the biggest gifts right off the bat of working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. When that ugly feeling would creep in, because it still did, I no longer said, what's wrong with me? I now knew what was wrong with me. Untreated alcoholism. And until you can put a label on it, you can't do anything about it. And the other thing that I really learned at that point is that I had a responsibility. If I've become at least reasonably armed with facts about myself and my alcoholism, and I've found this solution, I have a responsibility to show up and take my seat in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because only one alcoholic can help another alcoholic in the way that's necessary to bring about the necessary change. Lots of other people in society really try to help us. God, they're well-meaning, they're highly educated, and they would just love to help us, and they try. But it doesn't happen. It's the magic of one alcoholic sharing with another alcoholic that seems to have a message, as the book calls, with depth and weight, that seems to be able to bring about the change. And so I have a responsibility to be here. 2 years sober, got an honorable discharge out of the Navy. Amazing. That was like a merciful God, Alcoholics Anonymous, and a personnelman that lost half my file. That's how that happened. And the steps, And I moved up to Covina. I needed to go to school. One of the amends that I had to make that I couldn't make while I was still in the Navy was that my parents had paid for a bachelor's degree. I didn't have one. I either had to pay them back for it or go get what they had paid for in the first place. I know that's bad news to some of you 20-somethings, but that's what had to happen, and that's how I wound up in Covina, and I've been there for the last 20 years. The school I was going to go to was there, and I had everything I owned, push-started the car that I was in. I had this thing that Eddie used to actually call it this, the Rolls Canardly. Car that would roll down one hill and Canardly make it up the next is what it would do. Volkswagen had to push-start the thing, right? And I remember driving up here, and I was going to I was thinking, you know what, I got to get a life. I really need a life. This really sucks. I'm 2 years sober and I don't know what I'm going to do. I need a life. I'm going to work. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to work. And I'll stop by some meetings when I get a chance. But I need to work and go to school and get a life. And when I get a life, I can go to more meetings. But you know what, I need to, the next 3 years is about getting a life. Got it. And I pulled into the 502 Club in there in Covina. And this man I've already mentioned him, Eddie Cochran, was making coffee at the noon meeting. And he had this medallion that said 1951. I did the math real quick and meant he was sober 10 years when I was born. And he asked me the very same question that that guy asked me when I was fresh out of treatment. He goes, hey, never seen you before. What are you doing? And I had a good answer this time. I said, very nice to meet you. Nice to see the meeting hall in the area. You won't see much of me for a while, but it's nice to see where the meetings are. But I got to go to school and I got to work. I got to get a life. And Eddie just chuckled the way he always did. He would chuckle like this, hee 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 hee. And he was probably wearing mismatched socks and a Hawaiian shirt. And he said, oh, that's wonderful, school and work, that's just wonderful. But that's what we do in between meetings, son. And what he was telling me was the secret to long-term sobriety comfortably. And that is, what he was really telling me is that I needed to live in Alcoholics Anonymous and visit the world. Instead of trying to hash it out there in the world, and visit Alcoholics Anonymous when convenient. It does not work. In the 21 years that I've been here in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have had a legion of friends that have tried that method, and they're not here. They are not here. First thing he told me I needed to do was put new guys in that car. I objected very briefly, saying, there's a hole in the floorboard. One of them might fall through. I got to push start the thing. And he said, put new guys in that car, your life will get better. I didn't see how that would happen, but since he was 10 years sober when I was born, I thought I'd give it a try. The very first night that I did that, right after the meeting, I realized Eddie had not lied to me. Right after the meeting, I realized my life had gotten better. I looked over my shoulder as I sat in that driver's seat. My life had gotten better. The new guys were push starting my car for me. Didn't say how much better, just said better. In between meetings, I have found a life here in Alcoholics Anonymous that I did not even know was available for a guy like me. Didn't even know it was available. I have experienced things that I didn't know I would be able to experience. In the last 5 years, I've had some of the most joyful and painful times. Got married 5 years ago, 2 beautiful kids, divorced. Surprise, Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And it's divorce in AA, my God. But you know what? No matter what happens, actually my job is to be the best ex-husband I can be. The second thing is, I love my kids. I've had an experience with having those kids that I just never knew was available. I didn't know there was such a thing as instinctual unconditional love. I knew that there was this unconditional love that you remind yourself of. Oh, that's right, you're an ass, but that's right, unconditional love, that's right. But I didn't know there was this instinctual unconditional love until I had kids. And I love my kids with all my heart. I would never trade my kids for the first drink. But I'm alcoholic. I understand my alcoholism. I would trade them for the second drink like that. Therefore, there is nothing more important than staying right in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous and making my decisions from the inside of Alcoholics Anonymous. And therefore, I'd like to thank Laura for asking me to come down here and participate. I still had another sentence. That's all.